We are live now.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Very good evening to each and every one of you. Ramadan Mubarak to everyone who celebrates it. Welcome to this webinar organized by the College of Arts and Applied Sciences of Bukhara University, Salalah, Oman. We have speakers from different parts of the world this afternoon here with us. The title of the webinar is English Language Teaching, ELT, and COVID-19 Expectations and Innovations. Before we go ahead and start the webinar, the way that this is going to work is we will have the speakers talk about different topics, and I will introduce them in a few minutes. Then we'll take all the questions at the end. So to everyone who's watching us live on YouTube, hello, welcome, and thank you very much for your valuable time. We will take all of your questions through YouTube chat. So if you have any questions, please type them on YouTube chat, and I'll read them and deliver them to the speakers. So please write the question and the person that you wish to ask. Okay. Well, we will start with Dr. Vijay Thakur. Dr. Vijay Thakur is an associate professor of English Language and Linguistics. He's currently the Assistant Dean of College of Arts and Applied Sciences at Bukhara University, Oman. He holds a doctorate degree in Applied Sociolinguistics from Jabalpur University in India. His academic contributions include 2 books, 2 jointly edited books, 30 research papers, and 20 presentations at international conferences in the fields of TESOL, pedagogy, discourse, stylistics, and cross-cultural pragmatics. Dr. Vijay Thakur, please.
Thanks, Dr. Khalid. Very good day and warm welcome to this webinar entitled ELT in COVID-19, Expectations and Innovations, conducted from the College of Arts and Applied Sciences, Dhofar University, Oman, on May 9th, 2020. The title of my talk today is Challenges of Teaching Online, Connecting the Missing Pedagogical Links in Virtual Classrooms. This talk is based on a strong premise that community of students and the teacher's physical presence in a classroom are of vital importance to provide students with required pedagogical nutrition and sufficient learning opportunities for their sustainable academic growth and development. Let's talk about why community of students and physical presence of a teacher are necessarily required in a classroom. Community of students is required simply because knowledge is co-constructed through mutual interaction, shared discussion, argumentation, and negotiation of ideas and meanings in face-to-face interactions. And knowledge thus developed becomes a part of learning, which builds on, shaped, reshaped, and is cumulatively used for building one's skills and competence. And the teacher's physical presence in the classroom is necessary to perform the following core functions to facilitate effective language learning and language development. And the teacher's core functions are to manage classroom activities, to facilitate learning, to become a co-participant with students in the learning process, to motivate and stimulate the learner, to negotiate meanings, ideas, and responses, to act as an advisor and expert, to serve as a resource for the learners, to listen, observe, and monitor learners' attempts, to provide feedback on learners' attempts, and finally, to evaluate learners' efforts, achievements, and contribution. Now let's see, what does research say about online teaching and language development? Recent studies on online teaching suggest that online students often experience a sense of isolation and disconnection with their studies and institution. Also, instructor presence is strongly identified as an influential factor in terms of students' motivation to engage. This is by Munir and Levy, 2020. Studies on language learning and language development suggest that knowledge is socially constructed, by Gotsky, 1978. People employ incremental language skills not in isolation, but in tandem. Hinkle, 2006. Skill use is multi-layered, and therefore it would make no sense to teach each skill in isolation, and also that we need to replicate the natural process of skill mixing in order to provide maximum learning opportunities for different students in our classes. This is by Hammer, 2016. And finally, by Vilga-Rivers, 2000, communication derives essentially from interaction, and therefore skills need to be taught in an integrated, interactive framework. In online mode of teaching, the community of students and the teacher's physical presence are considerably missing. Therefore, the major pedagogical constraints faced by the teacher and the students result in the following: limited scope for interaction and integration of skills, limited scope for argumentation, negotiation of ideas and meanings, and simultaneous feedback management between the teacher and the students, limited scope for co-constructing knowledge, and also the time constraint. How can this missing pedagogical links be connected and the gaps be bridged? A suggested framework is the following. We need to multiply the time by 1.5 to provide sufficient opportunities for the students to perform and the teacher to facilitate. That is, 60 minutes physical class should become 90 minutes virtual class. Divide the lesson into 3 parts: presentation 30 minutes, practice 30 minutes, production 30 minutes. Begin with an interesting warm-up to create a meaningful context for the lesson, exploit students' prior knowledge, and then present and practice the teaching items included in the lesson. Design collaborative activities for practice and discussion tasks for production phase in every lesson, and also ensure integration of skills and shared interaction of students in these tasks and activities. Divide the class in groups of 6 students each group to select a group leader on rotation. Design interactive tasks and activities such as giving and justifying opinion, discussing causes and effects, arguing for or against an issue, and building consensus. Thus, the lesson can be organized into warm-up, presentation, practice, and finally independent production. Now, procedurally speaking, after the warm-up activity, the groups work on the topic. In the current context, a relevant argumentative topic, for instance, could be online mode of teaching is better than offline in-class teaching. Do you agree or disagree? Justify your stand. Students share ideas on the topic through online chatting within the group. Group leader takes notes, organizes the ideas, and presents it to the rest of the class. Students from other groups are invited to express their ideas and comments in agreement or disagreement with the ideas and arguments presented by today's group leader. The group leader is expected to defend. In every class, this exercise can be conducted on rotation of groups. Thus, the whole group activity can be conducted in an interactive mode and integrated skills framework. Finally, as an extension activity for the purposes of application of knowledge and skills introduced and practiced in the class, and also for their required scaffolding, each student can be assigned to develop a written text, revise it, and send the final version to the course instructor for evaluation and feedback in the forthcoming session. Thus, opportunities for interaction, giving opinions, agreeing and disagreeing, argumentation, negotiation of meaning, and thereby co-constructing knowledge and developing skills and competence can be maximized in online mode of teaching too. I'm sure creative and innovative teachers can adapt this framework and provide their students with a stimulating online learning experience. Thank you all for listening and later for asking questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vijay, for this very thoughtful framework that you proposed. Dr. Vijay Thakur's topic was titled Challenges of Teaching Online, Connecting the Missing Pedagogical Links in Virtual ELT Classrooms. Thank you very much, Dr. Vijay Thakur, and I'm sure you've raised a lot of questions that our audience, our students, our colleagues will be asking you later through the chat, and I will be delivering them to you. Our second speaker of this afternoon is, for him, it's early morning. Dr. Robert Connor from the United States. Dr. Robert, thank you for joining us. Dr. Robert holds a PhD in linguistics and educational research methodology from Louisiana State University in 2008, MA in teaching English as a second language, American University in 2005, and BE biomedical engineering from Vanderbilt University in 2000. Dr. Robert Connor is currently administrative assistant professor at Tulane University, and he also holds the position of director of English as a second language at the same university, Tulane University, since 2012. Dr. Robert is a well-established researcher and a speaker in the field of ELT and linguistics. And before we give the floor to Dr. Robert to share his thoughts and ideas, I would like to sincerely thank him for accepting our invitation. Thank you very much, Dr. Robert. On behalf of everybody at Dhafar University, I welcome you. And Dr. Robert will be talking to us about online assessment, expectations, and innovations. Dr. Robert, please.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for the very kind introduction. I enjoyed listening to Dr. Vijay as well. And one of the challenges I feel like that we have is how we're often asked to turn our traditional classes into online classes with very little time and very little preparation, especially in light of the COVID virus that's going around. And so what I wanted to present to you today was some different ideas that are circulating, as well as perhaps some different resources that you could use as you go through teaching and learning English. And I will do it with a bit of screen sharing, so it may take a little bit to switch over to my screen. But before I do that, I'll basically be talking about expectations. So what expectations should we have for ourselves and for our classes as we make the transition? Should we be trying to replicate physical classes, or should we be trying to create more native online classes designed specifically for online? And then I'll present SIOP, which is one of the ideas of sheltered instruction observation protocol and how that may help online. And then also a principle called the Universal Design for Learning. And then perhaps a resource called the Stevens Initiative that tries to connect different schools together. So I'll try to do that pretty briefly. So let me pull up my, my screen share at this point. And you should now be seeing yeah, may have to make it a little bit smaller. You should now be seeing some of the title slide that I created. Yeah, and so this would be me, online assessment and expectations. And now looking specifically at those expectations when we come in. So there's a group here in the United States called the Online Learning Consortium, basically a consortium, a group of universities that have gotten together over the years to try to come up with new methods. Now, they're not necessarily focused on language online, which, as we all know, can be very difficult to do because so much of language learning needs to be communicative and needs to be an enriching acquisition environment. So one of the things and there's the link there if you're interested in that group. One of the ideas is that as we switch over, perhaps we should not hold ourselves to the highest standard yet. Maybe next semester or next academic term, we can hold ourselves to the highest standard. And perhaps at this point, we should think about, well, what's good enough to get through? So is it good enough that we are able to do a few minutes synchronously, followed by some online discussion, followed by some online production, and as we improve throughout the semester, what will that get us through the term? So one of the principles, and this group here, the OLC, Online Learning Consortium, recently held a conference called Ideate, where they just kind of had salons for people to talk with each other. And one of them was to be kind to yourself as a teacher and to be kind to your students as we transition over to this. And so one of the things to think about is, do we replicate the in-person class or do we move to something that's native online? And I do not have a good answer for you, but I think as we heard and as we'll hear from other speakers, there's things that we would like to move over from our in-person classes, and there's maybe some things that we like to drop. And so maybe some of the things that we would like to drop have to do with a lot of legacy ideas with pure grammar teaching or focused solely on perfective production. So what I'll do is, as I go through some of these, is think about how we can put content at the forefront and put projects at the forefront as we teach. Now, the next point, the last one on this slide, talks about considering academic honesty and plagiarism. And when my university and some other universities switched over abruptly in the middle of the semester, we obviously had some issues that came up with students when they submitted their assignments. Now they're not quite as monitored, and it's easier to be tempted to use other people's words or to use other resources that aren't as allowed in the assessment. I think perhaps, as our other speaker said, it has to do with that teacher presence and about being fully present in the classroom and the students feeling like they're part of a community. So that might be the expectations. The expectation would be a difficult transition as we move to the assessment and having to worry about how we can keep our students engaged. And then the innovations, this part. And so I included a couple links to the SIOP, the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. And for those out there who it's a new idea, that basically what this is, it's a checklist of 36 things that are useful in a teaching method. And they compared one school district with another school district, and the school district that used all 36 of these checklists did a little bit better than a school district that didn't use all 36 of them. And so I like, when I think of it with my students, I like to think of it as kind of a checklist. If you're not sure what to do, this is a good resource to turn to. And some of it that are especially useful for online education is to always have a teaching and a language and a content objective that you've explained to the students and that the students can repeat back to you. So at the end of that lesson, at the end of whether it's 10 minutes or whether it's 2 hours, they know what the purpose is linguistically and what the purpose is content-wise. One of the reasons I really like this for education as well is it really keeps us a focus on what types of things from the classroom are we trying to replicate, whether it's materials, If we had them in the traditional classroom, what are the materials in the online one? The acquisition environment, keeping a text that's rich. If we had it in the classroom environment, we had words, language around us. How do we simulate that or even make it even better in the online environment? The next principle there, the universal design for learning, this is less widespread and it's not language specific, while the SIOP is more language specific, perhaps even English language learning specific. The universal design for learning basically started as an idea of how to reach people with special needs, whether the people have trouble concentrating or whether they had any type of disability, whether physical or emotional or mental. And it ended up that it's a lot of good ideas simply for teaching. And so you'll see a link for it there, and I'll just summarize it in 3 ways. They think about what are the ways that we can engage our students? What are the ways the students can represent the knowledge that they've done? And then how can they put it into action? And so when we're thinking about assessing English language learning, I really think about that action or that expression is an essential part. And this might be where online learning is a benefit. While an in-person classroom, our action is always going to be artificial. Maybe in the online environment, it can be a little bit more authentic and we can do more meaningful things. I'll talk about some of that briefly in a second, but the next link that I have there is this idea of a paper that had come out just recently in the National Proceeding of the Academy of Sciences here in the United States, and it's titled Measuring Actual Learning versus the Feeling of Learning in Response to Being Actively Engaged in the Classroom. And so what this was saying is students, when they're lectured to, like I'm doing right now, essentially, it's hard on us. It's hard on us to process and to imagine what the speaker is saying. So we feel some accomplishment and some real sense of learning when it's over. While if we're engaged in an active dialogue, which we'll probably do it in the question and answer, it's a little easier on us, so we don't feel like we've learned as much. But actually, if we test it out, we learn more through this active learning, as Dr. Vijay said, this construction of knowledge. So I think this is one of our challenges when it comes to assessment, is if we're moving away from traditional assessment towards project assessment, trying to think of how students can accomplish something online meaningfully. How do we make the students feel like they're learning? How do we make it, because they're not used to learning in that traditional classroom. So the last one I have here is a link, and it just says, being meaningful or authentic can be easier online. And it's a link to a group called the Stevens Initiative. And what the Stevens Initiative is about is trying to do virtual exchanges between mostly the United States and the Middle East and North Africa. So in the past, it's even though the COVID vaccine has made it harder to travel and interact across borders, in some extent that's been present around the world for a variety of different reasons. And so this group has been around for about 5 years, trying to connect classes in the Middle East and North Africa to classes in the United States and perhaps other places as well, and basically have students interact and try to create things together. So I guess in summary, I'd say as we move from online assessment and we think about our expectations might currently be very high, but we need to be kind to ourselves and to others, and realize that we're all going to make mistakes as we go through it. And perhaps this is a chance to really move towards content and project-centered learning. So with that, I will stop my screen share. And thank you for talking with me today. And I'd be glad to ask you questions after we listen to the others.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Robert. That was fruitful. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll come back to you with some more questions from the audience later. Our third speaker of today's webinar is Evelyn Jayapalan. I hope I'm pronouncing the last name correctly.
Correct.
She is a TESOL lecturer at Management and Science University, Malaysia. She's also Malaysian Qualifications Agency Auditor in charge of peer observation. Evelyn has rich teaching experience beside her expertise in blended learning. Evelyn will be talking to us this afternoon about online teaching and teacher training. Please, thank you very much for joining us, and we're really glad to have you. Just a gentle reminder to all the audience who are watching us. I'm following the chat on YouTube. Please make sure you write your questions and you write the name of the speaker that you want to direct the question to. Miss Evelyn, please start.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank to Dr. Khalid for giving me such a golden opportunity to speak on ELT and COVID-19 expectations and innovation. Also, special thanks to Dr. Sharina, whom I know quite a long time. We have worked together. All right. So yeah. As given the topic, the expectations and innovation, we are now currently going through some kind pandemic. It's not just one place of the world, but I think it's basically everywhere. And for today's talk, I would like to focus on teachers training, and then I will link a little bit on online teaching. First and foremost, just a little experience of mine. I've dealt with many classroom observation here, particularly on teachers training. How do they observe, how do they teach in physical classroom, all right? And I also in the midst of preparing a group of 86 students who will be undergoing for their internship in the coming semester, July 2020. Having said that, generally in classroom setting, we as lecturers usually prepare our students to physical classroom. We rarely talk about online teaching. But a couple of weeks ago, many have actually hit this current situation on COVID-19 and had basically affected many of us in many ways. And one of it is education, particularly on these teacher trainees. They are basically shocked to experience this kind of situation, and they are, I would say, they are panicked on how to conduct classes, specifically on online classes. In my case, the teachers are basically in a rural area. Some of them are in urban area. So we have very good technological platform. I would not deny that. We have video lectures, we have podcasts, we have Padlets, Google Classroom, so on and so forth. But having all this as a tool of teaching, many students from my end, they face a lot of issues with internet connection. All right, students these days are basically hyper connected and facile with gadgets and the internet. But when it comes to online teaching, these trainee teachers experience a lot of issues to actually get hold of them, to be connected and engaged in the teaching and learning. We are currently applying the synchronous learning. As to say that, we are also bringing in independent study. We can actually monitor students to a certain level. We can't be actually giving feedback all the time. But at one point of time, students have to be an independent learners. In my case also, I would like to highlight teacher trainees from two different categories. First of all, from the public school, and secondly, from the private school. There are two different scenarios of sets of students, how they actually handle online teaching and learning. As I said just now, students are basically, they are literate digitally. But when it comes to applying on certain teaching and learning, they have lots of excuses. Before I go on further, I would like to just highlight, we over here in Malaysia, we practices applying the CEFR, the Common European Framework of References for Languages for English Language Teaching and Learning. This has actually recently started in if I'm not mistaken, in 2017, they have actually practiced this in schools. But recently, they have made it compulsory for all schools, regardless primary and also secondary. Just for your footnote, the primary school from age 7 to 12, and the secondary is from 13 to 17. So they are the high school sets of students. As I was talking to some of the students, teacher trainees particularly, they were basically sharing some of their experiences, how they actually handle or tackle this kind of situation with students. A couple of weeks ago, many of my teacher trainees were very panicked, and they do not know how to handle this online teaching. But after advising them on certain things, on how to begin with this online teaching, they begin with WhatsApp groups. They created WhatsApp groups. And of course, as a supervisor, being a supervisor myself, I have to monitor how students, how these teacher trainees teach. It is definitely very different as the physical observation. So we are doing virtual observation in and out of how the teacher trainees engages the students to be part of the learning meaningfully. Because what I noticed that sometimes, like what Dr. Vijay and Dr. Robert were saying, how do the students actually construct knowledge is very important. It's very hard for us to actually see how the students construct their knowledge. All right. So what happened was when these WhatsApp groups were actually initiated, they have students inside. Many of them actually complain that they do not have the internet connection. That's number one. Secondly, many of the students basically do not have a smartphones in their homes. So that actually hinders for them into the online learning, because taking into consideration, most of the students come from mediocre social economic status. Some parents are frontliners. If they are frontliners, of course, they are able to provide all the technological tools for their kids. But taking into consideration a family who has low or medium social economic status, they can only just use their parents' smartphones. So that actually really brings a great obstacle in the online teaching. Aside from that, what I've actually made them do is I have actually come up with a phase of online teaching. The first 3 weeks, all my teacher trainees struggled into this WhatsApp teaching, because they had to share all their materials in the WhatsApp group, and student submission, like what Dr. Robert said, we have to give feedback to students' assessment. So in this case, we have 30 over students in a class. You only could receive 3 to 4 feedbacks from the students. So 3 to 4 feedback from students, I think is something very sad, that all we can say is not all 100% students are engaged in the teaching and learning. All right, that is still subjective, because they probably follow the lectures, they probably follow the lesson, but they are not actually engaging in the assessment. All right. And in the private school, on the other hand, I was this evening, I was actually talking to some of the teacher trainees from the private school. These set of students, they have very good facility at home. They have their smartphones, they have their pads, so iPad, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, it's the parents who is actually hindering them from their teaching and learning. They give reasons like they're not supposed to be online too long, it affects their eyesight, things like that. So it is two different situation by the students here, private and also public school students situation. Having said that, as we see into the English learning, teaching and learning, the Malaysian Blueprint 2013 to 2025, and it is still active. We have another 5 years to go for it to expire. It basically sets the aspiration for students to be proficient in both our national language and also English. But having said particularly on English, it's very, very hard for all these trainee teachers to really drill them because I still notice there's still use of grammar translation method. Yes, students just refuse to use the language. Uh, Over here, it's very challenging for the teachers to control, because I've seen how students actually who hardly could speak a word of English tend to write their essays in our national language, which is Bahasa Malaysia. So when they tend to do that, their understanding, their construction of certain meanings, it is not that really accurate. So like what Dr. Vijay was saying, motivating learners is very important, because I believe, and I've actually mentioned to all my students, as a teacher, we have to take the accountability to teach, facilitate our students' learning. It is unfair for us to just ignore them. But in this time of pandemic, I think it's very challenging for all teachers, even me personally. I find very difficult, because they give reasons like they don't have internet connection. They could not hear you, they can't understand. So for us to give an individual coaching, that really takes time. And to be very honest, we teachers are basically working 24/7. We don't have a business hours now during this MCO time. All right, so these are the challenges, and I believe there are lots of things that we can actually look on how to innovate online teaching. It is not about the technological platform. I personally feel it is about the delivery online teaching. Thank you very much from me.
Oh, thank you very much, Evelyn. I absolutely agree with you. It's not about the software, it's not about the programs, it's about the people. You can invest on the most expensive programs and software, but if you don't have the right people to deliver it, then it's something to be reconsidered. Thank you very much, and I'm sure I'll come back to you with some more questions from the audience. Our fourth speaker of the evening is Dr. Rima Dajjali. Dr. Rima Dajjali is currently the Dean of Gulf College in Oman. She is the Deputy Chair of Oman Academic Accreditation Authority Board of Directors, OAAA. Dr. Rima Dajjali is a graduate of Sultan Qaboos University College of Education. She has an MA in Language Testing and Program Evaluation with distinction from the University Essex, UK, and a PhD degree in Applied Linguistics from the University of Lancaster, UK. Dr. Rima served as an external reviewer with the Oman Academic Accreditation Authority, OAAA, from 2010 to 2020, January 2020. She participated as a panel member in a number of institutional and GFP audit quality audits. She also served as a panel member in the first institutional standards assessment in Oman. I think I remember that very well. And she chaired the first GFP quality audit in Oman. Dr. Rima also served as an executive officer during her secondment at the OAAA in 2012. She was appointed as a member of OAAA Board of Directors in January 2020. Dr. Rima is also a certified KPI trainer and certified performance improvement professional by the KPI Institute. Dr. Rima will be talking to us this evening about assuring the quality of teaching and learning in unprecedented time. Dr. Rima, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much also actually for giving me this opportunity to share our thoughts with you today. Basically, I'd like to talk perhaps from a hands-on account on the topic of quality assurance and how we as a private institution in the Sultanate of Oman, like the rest of the world, had to cope and manage with a situation that is kind of obviously unprecedented for our generation, given the impact it had on all of us. So in reflection, I feel that actually in order to manage and cope with the situation, we had to combine principles of quality assurance as well as crisis management, because this was obviously a very unexpected situation. It did not even feature, say, in any of our risk registers and so on. given that it came kind of suddenly. However, we did try from the very beginning, from the offset of the situation, to take a proactive approach to the issue, and we kind of had a joint meeting from a college board, academic board, health and safety committees, and so on, so that we try to be as prepared as possible for shifting to remote classes or remote learning as soon as we expected the Supreme Committee that's handling the situation in Oman to announce the suspension of classes. And so we started like 2 weeks before the decision from the beginning of March. And we basically, what we had in mind, and today I'm going to share with you from our point of view, what we did so well and what we did not do so well in hindsight. Just in reflection to what Dr. Robert said earlier, so that we are kind to ourselves. And we know that we need to handle the expectations, and we learn as we go in this situation. So to begin with, when of course we took all the precautions for health and safety and so on, but today I'm focusing on the academic aspect of the matter. To begin with, what our prime focus was really on how we are going to deliver the classes, how we are going to, put our curriculum in a way online so that it's accessible to as many students as possible. I would say not to all students, because as we know, in a country like Oman, we are in the capital of Oman, and a good percentage of our students are not originally from Muscat, but they are based in Muscat because of their job requirements. And as soon as the lockdown started and teaching was suspended, many of them went back to their hometowns, so they were not as accessible as we were hoping for. Although when we started the whole planning, we actually considered our student profile, we looked at where they're coming from and so on, but it was not that meaningful to us when we realized that they may have gone home now. Anyway, so when we started, our initial decision was to go with recording or video recording all our lectures and putting them through the Moodle, uploading them onto Moodle. And we thought, because this is a platform that we already have, our teachers and students are familiar with it, everything is going to go so well and we'll be fine with it. Little did we know, only 1 week after launching this mode of learning, let's say, and the same day the suspension of classes took place, we said to our students, there you go, all your lectures are video recorded in Moodle, you have your teachers accessible, you can chat with them. And we were like, basically looking at the situation. What happened is that actually the majority of our students were not as happy as we thought. And they went into our social media accounts and they were like complaining. Some of them said we are not learning that much. Obviously, many of them at that point were still complaining of having not expected this situation. Many of them did not have proper internet connection, proper facilities, and so on. So during that week, the same week, we thought perhaps we need to go back to the basics and remind ourselves of the principles of quality assurance once again, and crisis management. So we decided to look at main areas or key areas in this aspect, which are strengthening or adapting our usual processes through which we usually provide our services, so that we are prepared for this unexpected crisis element, providing leadership and teamwork, and I'll elaborate on that a bit more, focusing on the need of key stakeholders, obviously our students, but not assuming what we think is going to be right for them. We thought this is time to pause and get more of our students' feedback on board to hear more from them. And also another element is database decision making, improving our communication with our stakeholders, mainly students and staff. And we talked about ongoing quality enhancement and reflection. So with that in mind, during the first week of learning, when students were using Moodle account and so on, we conducted an online survey in coordination with our student council. We involved the student council representatives. We met over the weekend with them and we developed an online survey to the students. About 60 to 70% of our student population responded to the survey. And the two elements that they mainly complained about were the connectivity issue and the lack of interactivity in Moodle platform. So what we did eventually, in consultation with all the relevant stakeholders for us, our board of trustees, our partner universities, and so on, because we run our programs in academic affiliation with 2 universities in the UK. So we decided to basically freeze the academic year for 4 weeks and utilize those 4 weeks for us to go back and reflect on the situation and how can we improve it. And that's it. And I think it was a wise decision. So during those 4 weeks, and obviously we kept communicating with our students through letters from the dean, social media, emails, and so on, and we kept them in the loop. Why have we decided to stop or freeze the calendar for 4 weeks? We did involve you from the beginning, and we reflected on their feedback and some of the suggestions students had made. We explained to them why they're not feasible and so on. So during those 4 weeks, we utilized the student input from the survey in improving our processes. We trained our staff. We actually identified another software or platform that enables us to conduct our classes, live classes this time. We thought we have already recorded our lectures and classes for Moodle. Let's use those as a reference material, as a resource for our students. But at the same time, we shifted to online classes after 4 weeks and sort of postponing the semester. So the 4 weeks were used for proper training for our teachers on using this platform. We piloted using this platform with all our students, so that by the time we actually commence the semester, resume the semester, there would be fewer problems. We obviously, at the same time, many developments were taking place in the country that helped us do things better in a way. For example, different charities in Oman started, distributing used and new laptops and computers to students. Our telecommunication providers started providing other packages and so on. So during those 4 weeks, actually, the situation was getting better and better for us. After the 4 weeks, we went back and during the 4 weeks, and it's now been 3 weeks of live classes for us. So where did we integrate the elements of quality assurance? We kept reflecting on our processes as we went on. We adopted some of our existing regulations and policies, obviously in coordination with our partner universities. We've been, for example, now we've just finalized the no detriment policy with our partner universities to ensure no students are academically disadvantaged by this shift in mode of learning. We have even, we have been recently working on strengthening our ERP system. And this was a golden opportunity actually for us to test things like complete online academic advising, complete online academic counseling. We are now experimenting or start planning actually for some social events with our students and with our staff online, so that we show them that we are on board and we're considering their feelings and the anxiety they must be going through during this stage. In terms of the quality of teaching as well, we have developed a different survey or instruments of evaluating the quality of teaching than the usual ones. Different surveys that are perhaps initially they were focused on identifying the concerns teachers had with online learning or teaching. As Evelyn mentioned earlier, the teachers, to begin with, we assume teachers would be fine with using online learning. But different people had different capabilities, and they had their own fears to share. So that we are also now considering the online classroom observation to further support our students. The survey, as I said, is now going to be every other week for our students, so that we can compare when we are done the results. In terms of improving the communication, as I said earlier, which is another principle we worked on, improving communication with our stakeholders and especially with our students. After 1 week of live classes, for example, we called every single student by phone, students who did not appear for classes in the first week, so that we know what is exactly the problem and identify the students who had problems with not having a computer, or sometimes in one household the entire family is sharing one device. So we identified those students and try to offer as much support as possible, including now we're working on an initiative to get some companies to sponsor buying other devices for our students and so on. So basically, I think when the situation started, we went ahead, we thought this is it, simple solution, we'll just administer the classes through Moodle. But in hindsight, when we paused and we utilized those 4 weeks, and it reminded ourselves, or basically reminded ourselves of the principles of crisis management and quality assurance, I think that we managed to cope much better than we had anticipated. The student feedback in the latest survey we did is much better than the initial one, because as I said, we introduced this element of interactive learning, and we are going to continue working on continuous assessment, improvement. Just an element on assessment itself. The key aspect that we focused on in terms of producing alternative assessments, because we could no longer obviously bring the students for face-to-face exams in the traditional manner. The alternative assessments we focused on, perhaps the key concept was ensuring that we meet the learning outcomes in teaching, and at the same time we assess the learning outcomes, obviously, and that we come up with reliable instruments. But at the same time, as mentioned earlier by I think one or two of you, we had to also consider academic honesty. So, you know, when we were planning for alternative assessments, for example, we replaced group presentations with individual presentations. And then the teacher said, but how if it's only audio? And they were concerned that some female students would say, we don't want ourselves to be video recorded in this PowerPoint and so on. The teachers were concerned, how am I going to know that out of say 30, 40, 50 students I teach, that this is actually say Rima's voice, not someone else is giving me the presentation. So small things like these we had to think of. And the suggestion we had is, okay, we'd use the same platform, Microsoft Teams. The student can just switch on the camera for 1 second, show her face, say, this is Rima, this is my topic today, switch off the camera and the video recording and share the screen, the PowerPoint. So it's basically, it's like giving a picture. It's not a whole video of the session. And students were more welcoming of this solution. So as I said, we're learning from the experience as we go, and we're trying to make sure that we are improving as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rima. That's quality assurance and leadership at its best. Thinking of the smallest details and making sure that everything falls in place. Thank you very much for all the work that you're doing and for sharing your experience with us, Dr. Rima. The audience, people have raised some questions here. So I will try to read some questions. The first question is to Dr. Connor. Robert, the question is, how can we assure validity of assessment while teaching online?
I think that's a difficult question. It's hard to do even when doing offline to make sure that our assessments are truly measuring what they intend to measure. Well, I think on one aspect, I think about, and it's something that I've heard from several of the speakers, which is the face validity of what we do. Does what we do match what the students think that learning looks like? So I'd say that that's one way to consider when you do it. I guess over time, we'll be able to compare classes that were in person and then classes that were online by similar people and see if we have similar results or similar outcomes. But I think it's something that we'll struggle with, but perhaps one of our other speakers has a better answer for that.
Thank you very much. The second question is for Dr. Vijay. Dr. Vijay, how does your proposed model address individual differences among learners?
Again, we talked about forming groups.
Mm-hmm.
So every day one group will be working and we can see them working, interacting with each other, playing different roles. And then they will be directly interacting with the teacher also. So teacher can manage, monitor, advise. That is why I suggested we cannot handle all the groups on the same day. We have half an hour for group activity. So one group every day, and that can go on rotation. So those 6 students can be monitored for individual differences. And teachers, they can get the feedback from the teacher and they can work accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question. Another question to Dr. Robert Connor by Dr. Awad Al-Hassan. Robert, how did you address the academic integrity issue? I think you already answered this somehow.
It was, well, I actually liked how Dr. Rima had struggled with the same issue, you know, making sure the students are truly who they are when they go through the speaking, and she had come up with a very concrete solution. In our case, I would say we haven't solved it. We're still struggling with that issue, especially in regards to writing, and if you have some type of test or project where you want to limit the students. But I'd say long-term, if we're looking at having the students do something meaningful, then perhaps they'll be less likely to, they'll use resources just like we do, use them to accomplish something rather than use them to copy and to search only for a grade or a scale.
All right. Okay, thank you. Next question is for Dr. Rima Zijjali by Dr. Ahmed Belkhair. Dr. Rima, do you think that the Omani HEIs are ready for this kind of education from your point of view?
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just say that I think HEIs in Oman, the higher education system, is perhaps more ready or more prepared in a way than the school system, for example. Because many of us, I think, have already utilized some aspects or some form or another of online classes, but not fully, not to this extent, obviously. So I cannot say that we are 100% ready with it. The whole situation took us all by surprise, to be honest. But I think we have more of the infrastructure and of the resources, human resources and so on, and of the experiences overall in integrating technology in learning and teaching than many other institutions, say for perhaps you know, in the education system, not the higher education system. It's unprecedented times, as we all know. I think it's not going to be, we were not 100% prepared, but I believe that the majority of the institutions in Oman, actually all of us in Oman, have been, you know, the directions we received from the Ministry of Higher Education is that the semester has to go on. Now, for some of us, perhaps the semester had started earlier, say in January, so they were in a better position to decide to shorten the semester than others. For us, for example, that was not an option at all, because we had barely started 2 weeks of the semester when the classes were suspended. So it really differs from one institution to another. But overall, I think we have been doing a reasonable job. On a personal level, I have established, you know, some sort of networks. You all know, Dr. Khalid, that we have various networks in Oman that give us the opportunity as higher education institutions to get together and share thoughts and so on. I have tried my best to connect with the different vice chancellors and deans across Oman, and we have been sharing our experiences in full transparency and learning from each other, so that at the end of the day, the idea is that we want education to go on. And I think that's maybe perhaps one of the blessings of the situation, is that we have all cooperated. It's no longer about competition and so on. It was all about cooperation.
I agree with you, Dr. Rima. I think if COVID-19 has taught HEIs in Oman anything, it's the importance of cooperation and working together. And that has been a wonderful experience for all of us, I think. Hopefully we will go through this together, and we're learning from each other's experiences. The next question is for Ms. Evelyn. Evelyn, the question is about Malaysia and diversity in Malaysia. How does COVID-19 affect Malaysian teachers across ethnic groups in Malaysia? That's a very interesting question.
Culturally, I think not so much of impact. It is more on the social economic status of the students. Like I mentioned just now, because some of them comes from remote area, so they don't have that connection, stable connection into the teaching and learning. That is why I spoke in terms of the private and the public perspective category of students, how they handle. It is not much on ethnic, but I would say it's more to the category of students where they come from.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Next question to Dr. Rima again by Mr. Ahmed Al-Ani. What is the future of online teaching in Oman after COVID-19?
Wow, I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer this question.
But from your own opinion, of course,
Yes.
he's asking about your own perspective.
I think it made us realize more and more that actually this may be the new reality. Because as you know, even in the latest press conference in Oman, the Minister of Health was talking about this situation may be going on for months or maybe even years. It basically made it a pressing reality, a pressing situation that we have to all address. Because, I mean, let's admit it, we have all had some sort of infrastructure, we have all had the background and the resources and so on, but I don't think we actually realized the urgency of the matter of going completely for remote classes and online learning and so on. And that's why, as I said, even when I thought that our institution is prepared and we can do it, as soon as the reality hit, it was like a wake-up call. We realized that we had not thought of every aspect. Think of the assessment, for example, as was mentioned. How are you going to assess the validity of the assessment you're going to give to your students? There are certain also disciplines, if I may, just because we talked about assessment, and the readiness of the sector as well. For some disciplines, but today we are focusing on English language teaching and learning. It may be much easier, in my opinion, to go for online learning for English language, for example. But say computing, our faculty for computing sciences suffered more than the rest of us, because the students, for example, did not have access to the kind of software and so on. They were supposed to practice the ones they had access, were accessible to them in the labs in the college itself. So, it's more difficult for other disciplines than it is for English language learning. I believe that we have the capability, we have the right software, we have the right skills among ourselves in the sector. Perhaps we needed this wake-up call to realize how urgent it is and that this may be the new reality, and we're working on that now.
Thank you very much. Actually, the next question is related to what you just mentioned, Dr. Rima, but the question is directed to Ms. Evelyn. How is teaching of science and math affected by COVID-19?
Teaching science and maths still comes under the pedagogical essence. But currently, since we have actually gone all online teaching, what is assisting here is they have the online textbook. But comes again when the instruction given by the teachers and the challenges where the students are unable to understand, that actually affects a lot, because when talk about mathematics, a lot of working need to be explained. And many teachers over here, when it comes to maths and science, they easily actually share YouTube videos that can actually ease the understanding of students when it comes to the technicality of comprehension.
Okay, thank you. Question to Dr. Robert Connor by Dr. Abdul Qadir Sayed. Do you think that online teaching will replace traditional teaching in the US and around the world?
Well, I think it will in a lot of cases. I think we're learning right now that a lot of the things that we've done in the past, for example, meeting every day or several times a week, may not be the best way in all cases for all subjects. So I think well, I can say that almost assuredly that some aspects will pass away and become more online. And I actually look forward to that because it might make our in-person sessions more fruitful. The things that should be online can be online, and the things that should be in person can be in person. Now, deciding what those things are, well, that's the trick, I think, deciding what's best online and what's best in person. But I think a good aspect of university life will. Now, I have some children, and their elementary school classrooms are most definitely not best online. They've tried it, but hasn't worked out quite as well. It works out what you would expect for young children online.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Vijay, the question is how to overcome any classroom challenges that may arise while implementing online teaching. That's a very general question. And
very general. What sort of problems? Technical problems?
let's start.
Disciplinary problems?
Pedagogical problems. But the person who asked this question didn't specify, but let's just look at it from pedagogical issues or pedagogical perspectives.
This is online mode, and maybe some students might disappear, join, and then disappear. So I don't know what kind of problems he's referring.
All right. Another question for Dr. Rima Zijjali. We'll take 3 more questions. This question is asked by Dr. Khidr. Dr. Khidr is asking Dr. Rima about teaching practical classes like physics labs.
Okay. We don't have practical classes and so on, and so we did not have that element, to be honest.
So you don't have that element in your college. Excellent. Another question also asked by Dr. Nizar. Dr. Nizar, the question is directed to Dr. Rima. Don't you think that post-corona education will lead to redefining the concept of quality in education?
To a certain extent, yes, I think to a certain extent, because you know, many of the set of policies and processes we have in place, perhaps we did not really reflect on them and think to ourselves, how can I convert this into a completely, you know, online or virtual process? For example, simple example, the student grievances policy and processes and so on. I mean, the process involves going from, you know, from one level to another, going to one committee to another, and so on. And sometimes a lot of the things involved, you know, providing paper-based evidence and so on, or physically being around for a certain grievance or whatever. In hindsight, we decided that even that has to be now completely, you know, paperless process, and we have decided to integrate it. So yes, I think the post-COVID-19 situation will make us actually reflect. Maybe if this goes on, and we hope that it does not go on for that long, even the simple, you know, even standards of accreditation and so on, we may want to go back and reflect on them and see, you know, which ones may deserve more importance and which ones, you know, we actually may be introduced, for example. As an institution that's preparing for accreditation and you know, managing this institution and being a member of the OAAA board itself, it actually made me think of which of these criteria, which of these elements or standards may actually deserve a kind of more attention, and we may need to add and incorporate other elements to them. You know, for example, in terms of assessing the teaching quality, assessing the quality of our assessments and so on, as long as we work on the principles of, for example, meeting the outcomes, learning outcomes and so on, it's fine. But to be honest, in reality, it's much harder done than said. As you mentioned in some of our, you know, the question that came about practical components and so on. It's more difficult. We thought about, I attended a webinar the other day, and some institutions in other countries in the region were talking about For example, virtual internships. Virtual internships are not doable in the circumstances when most of the country is in lockdown anyway, for example, and many of the businesses are closed. So there are lots of things that really depend on the circumstances surrounding us at the moment. But I did want to also kind of, if you allow me 1 second, to comment on the question that was given to Dr. Vijay about pedagogic issues. When he commented about students going offline, these are all small things that we learn from experience. Again, when we asked our teachers about the views, some of them said some students just switch on the computer, log in, and then they disappear. So we don't know whether they're actually attending the lesson or not. So simple tip or piece of advice I gave, for example, to my colleagues in the foundation program, English language teachers in particular, is that to make sure that they have some sort of interactive exercise, task-based, and make it very random, not expected. So for example, today at the very first 10-15 minutes of the lesson, you ask the students something that involves some sort of collaboration, and you say, Ali, can you answer this question? Muhammad, can you answer that question? Tomorrow, integrate a similar task, but maybe in the second half of the class, so that you are not that predictable. And simple tips, but they come from actually the very unique issues we are facing these days.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Miss Evelyn, have you ever considered teacher motivation?
Teacher motivation is highly essential, because if a teacher herself or himself is not motivated, definitely they will not bring an impact to students, because teachers are role model to students. That is why ethics in teachers are very, very important. Motivation among teachers, very, very important, that they can actually bring up an impact to students, not just on content knowledge. I see it's more on how you develop or coach, groom students in value as well, and and also in characteristics. And having said that, even the CEFR framework that we are using in school, we basically focus on 5 communicative skills, on listening, reading, spoken interaction, and spoken production and writing. All this is just, if you look at it is just on content. But if you really go on ground, it is more beyond than this content knowledge, that we groom learners on characteristics of themselves.
Okay. Thank you very much. Before we close the session, what we will do now, I will kindly ask each speaker to, let's say, wrap up your talk, your thoughts for 1 hour, one minute or so. So we'll start with Robert.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this on, and thank you for the other speakers. I definitely learned a lot from your presentations. And I guess what I would summarize my message as being is, think about the possibilities. Think about the future that we can do now that we are online, and the connections that we can make across boundaries that we might not have considered before. That we would have thought, oh, we need to do this in person. We need funding to travel here. We need funding to travel there. Now that we're a little more accepting of this online thing, perhaps we'll be able to connect with each other more and work through some of these issues together as we all struggle with it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Vijay Thakur.
After listening to all the speakers today, the session developed into a multi-level of discussions on various topics. One possibility we can explore nationally, of course, and if possible internationally, we can do some sort of networking. And online, it is very easy to go for teacher exchange programs and helping each other. Maybe we can exchange some classes. Faculty members from our institution, they take a number of classes in other institutions. Similarly, they can do to maximize best possible exposure to our students and give them a better quality of teaching. And of course, solidarity will strengthen, which is needed the most during such difficult times. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Vijay. Evelyn?
Okay, as from my end, I really encourage all the trainee teachers to always be motivated, to take this as a great accountability, to always coach, guide, groom your students, and never take this as a burden. But this is part of the challenges in teaching, because teaching is definitely not something that's easy, because many people see teaching is something easy. But in fact, in reality, it is not, because we are dealing with individuals, because every individual with a different capacity of understanding. So that is very essential. And teachers basically have to maintain their momentum and their strength to continue building up students. That's all. Thank you.
Dr. Rima Zijani?
I think to me, the key word is perhaps reflection. And as I said, in unprecedented times, we learn as we go. And this is basically, we are collecting a lot of experience from this situation. I'd like to also say that another keyword for me is engagement with our students, engagement with all our staff. And to reflect on Evelyn just said about staff motivation also, one thing that we need to reflect on is the well-being of our students as well as the well-being of our teachers during these difficult times. It's so you need to be compassionate and understand what people are going through as parents. These teachers are parents. These teachers may have their own concerns and difficulties, and at this time, so it's always good to listen to them. And we are working on as I said before, a social evening, basically an online virtual gathering with our teachers to basically share their views and see what they're going through. So that's important. Another thing is perhaps that we learned from this experience is that we have some resources. Actually, we have the infrastructure, we have some software, we have some people around us, but this situation, like any other difficult situation, has taught us to maximize utilizing these existing resources. So many people have come on board because they had skills that we didn't know about, basically, and this is their opportunity to come and share their thoughts. And lastly, as Dr. Vijay said, and I mentioned it before, networking is very important at this stage. I really strongly think that networking, across all the HEIs or higher education institutions in Oman is really crucial at this stage, so that we learn from each other. And again, I say it's no longer about competition. Let's put competition aside. It's about cooperation and learning from each other in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rima. Before we conclude the session, there are a few people that I would sincerely like to thank. Dr. Abdurrahman Ahmed Saleh, the head of the Department of English Language and Literature. Would you please start sharing the video with us so people recognize who you are? Dr. Abdurrahman.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, thank you very much for all the work that you've put to make this session successful. Thank you. Your work is highly appreciated.
All right.
Wonderful partner, Mr. Faisal Al-Blushi and his colleagues in the Department of, the Omani Society for Educational Technology. Thank you very much, Mr. Faisal. Faisal?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you very much, Faisal.
You're welcome. Before I just can join, I just asked Dr. Abdurrahman to stop sharing his screen if you can.
Dr. Abdurrahman, please stop sharing the screen. Stop sharing.
Right. Okay, sure. Is that okay?
stop sharing, please.
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Faisal is our Oman Society for Educational Technology is our partner, and they've been working closely with us in the last few weeks. They helped us shift some centers around here at the college online. So thank you very much, Faisal. Thanks to your team and wonderful job.
Yeah, you're welcome, Dr. Khalid, and it was great privilege to to work with all of you and the team in the Dhafar University.
Okay. My sincere apologies to all of our colleagues. There are lots and lots of questions posted on the YouTube chat. I think if we take all of them, we'll end up taking 3 or 4 hours of our speakers' time, and people are at different time zones. On behalf of the College of Arts and Applied Sciences of Dhafar University, Oman, I would like to sincerely thank our speakers, Dr. Vijay Singh Thakur, the Assistant Dean of the College. Thank you very much, sir. It's always a privilege working with you. Okay, Ellen, thank you. Evelyn, sorry. Evelyn, thank you very much. I know it's getting late in Malaysia. Thank you very much for sparing these couple of hours to talk to us and share your wonderful experience with us.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Dr. Rima, it's always wonderful seeing you and talking to you and working with you. Thank you very much for taking this time out of your very busy schedule to come and talk to us this afternoon. Dr. Rima?
My pleasure. Appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, Dr. Robert Connor, I know it's early where you are now, so thank you very much for coming to talk to us this morning or this evening. Thank you very much, Robert. It's been
my pleasure. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you in future webinars. In a couple of days, we're going to have another webinar in Arabic about teaching online challenges and opportunities. So we'll send the link to everybody, and then a few days after that, we'll have another one about medical social workers. So please stay tuned. Dr. Rima, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody, and take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.